as we've seen in previous episodes, a mental health crisis means that someone is at a high and imminent risk of harming themselves or harming others. So this means that we don't have to be struggling with our mental health or living with a mental illness to be in a mental health crisis. Just like someone might have a car accident, God forbid, and require immediate medical attention, we might have a big event in our lives like losing a loved one that gets us very disoriented and requires an immediate attention. Now, it might be easy for us to recognize when we are in a mental health crisis, but how do we recognize that in other people around us? What are the signs that we can look for? Sentences such as, "Nobody cares about me," "Nobody cares if I disappeared," or "Nothing really matters anymore" are signs of suicidal thoughts, or could be signs of suicidal thoughts. Also, other signs could be giving away your possessions as a way of saying goodbye, or in some cases, someone might be extremely happy all of a sudden when they were feeling down for a while, and it could be a sign of relief because they found a solution to end their suffering. Now, if we see any of those signs, it's time to ask the hard and direct questions. We know this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's worth it if it's going to save someone's life. So the questions that we can ask are, do you think about suicide? Are you thinking of harming yourself or others? Do you have a plan? Now, there's a misconception that asking those questions are going to put the idea of suicide in the other person's mind, but that's simply not true. It's just to make sure where the person stands, and at the very least, they're going to be a little bit upset that you asked that question, but it's worth it just to make sure that they're safe.
I know we've said this a lot, but I'll say it again. As members of the one body of Christ, it is our duty to look out for the other members who are also part of this one body in Christ. Of course, you're not to be their healer. That's Jesus's job, but it's still your job to make sure that the person is okay. Of course, praying for them is part of it, but also asking the hard questions and making sure that they get the medical attention that they need, or encouraging them in some sort of way is also part of your duty. It's very important also not to make the person feel judged. We only have one judge, that's Jesus, not us. And if you see someone who is in the darkness, don't go and tell them that they're in the darkness, but instead be some sort of light to them. Ask yourself, what would Jesus do to help this person?
Now, what happens if the person actually answers yes to one of those questions? So there's no need to panic. Just remember that you're not a mental health professional. You're there just to support them and accompany them as a friend or a family member. The important thing to do is bring your compassion and stay with them until you get help. And by help, we mean either calling 911, driving them to the hospital, calling the crisis helpline with them, connecting them to a family member that can get them to another help. The important thing is not to leave them alone until you've got that help. And we know that this might take a toll on your own mental health, so it's important for you to take some time to do some self-care activities or even seek out professional help if you feel the need to.
So remember that, yes, our duty as Christians is to bear with one another, but notice that we are told to bear with one another and not instead of one another. We bear with one another by showing each other some love, by sacrificing our time and energy. But if you yourself aren't well, then you cannot give more energy or time. Instead, take time, pray to God for more energy, or pray to God for Him to help you discern when it is appropriate to help another versus when it's appropriate to help yourself also. In Acts chapter 16, St. Paul and Silas were stuck in prison. It was very dark at night when they were singing praises to the Lord, and all of a sudden a great earthquake happened and the prison cells opened and they were given the chance to escape. When the prison guard knew that the prison cells were opened, he thought that everyone already escaped and was about to harm himself. But St. Paul, seeing that the guard was going to do himself harm, actually cried out to him and said, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." And then the guard called for the light, and he saw that they were actually still there. And that day, that guard, along with his whole family, was saved. We can see that the guard was still in darkness when he wanted to possibly harm himself. If you see someone who is in darkness, do not go and tell them that they are in darkness, but instead go and be a light to them, just like St. Paul was. He didn't go and blame the guard right away. Instead, he went and helped him, and he said, "Don't be afraid, we're still here. Your job was not poorly done." And on that day, the guard and his whole family, so his whole household, was saved. Just like if we think of someone who is thinking of harming themselves, if they actually go through with it, it not only hurts them, but their whole family. So if you see someone who is possibly going to harm themselves, in order to avoid any sort of sadness among the household, you can actually be that light, just like St. Paul was.